The fluorescent lights over my hospital bed were still humming when I opened Facebook and saw my sister's post. Some people create emergencies because they need attention. She did not say my name, but she did not have to. My father had already decided I was the problem after I collapsed mid-shift at Riverside Medical Center in Columbus. I was 39, a single mother, and I had been working double shifts for so long that exhaustion felt more normal than rest. What I did not know that night was that while I was lying there with an IV in my arm, the man who taught me to stay strong was quietly using my name and my 9-year-old daughter Sophia's to build debt we never asked for. And he was not done. By Sunday, 25 people from our church would sit in one room and hear the story my family had been telling about me. They just did not know yet that the truth was about to turn around and look right back at them. Nicole Harris, our charge nurse, glanced at the board and shook her head. Another trauma coming in. I nodded and tied my hair back tighter. My scrubs were already damp with sweat. I had worked at Riverside Medical Center since 2014. Back then, I thought ER nursing was intense but manageable. After the pandemic, everything changed. Staff shortages turned every shift into a marathon. By 2025, most weeks I was working more than 60 hours, sometimes 70. It was not just for the overtime pay, it was because my paycheck supported more than just me. My daughter, Sophia, was 9. She was the center of everything that mattered in my life. We lived in a small house in North Linden that I bought in 2017 after my divorce. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, and a kitchen table where Sophia did homework every afternoon. For a few years, it was just the 2 of us. Then, in 2020, my father, Thomas Reed, lost his HVAC contracting business. A series of bad investments and the economic fallout from the pandemic wiped him out faster than anyone expected. My parents asked if they could stay with me for a while until they got back on their feet. I said yes. A year later, my younger sister Brittany moved in after her marriage fell apart. What started as temporary slowly turned into normal. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, most of it ran through my bank account. Growing up, I had always been the dependable one. When I was in high school, from 2002 through 2006, I worked at a grocery store after class. Brittany did not have to. My parents said she needed more time to focus on school. "You're stronger," my father used to tell me. "You can handle more." Back then, I believed him. In the ER, a nurse called my name. "Elena, we need you in trauma too." I slipped on gloves and stepped into the room where a young man from the highway crash lay on a gurney. The next hour blurred into the rhythm I knew too well. Blood pressure readings, IV lines, chart updates, quick conversations with doctors. At some point, Nicole touched my shoulder. "You look pale." "I'm fine." "You've been on your feet all night." "I'm good." She studied me for another second. "Take 10 minutes in the break room." I did not argue. When the charge nurse tells you to sit down, it usually means everyone else has noticed something too. The break room was quiet compared to the chaos outside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone had left a half-empty cup of coffee on the table. I sat down and took a long drink of water. The room tilted slightly. I remember thinking that I should stand up and go back to work before anyone noticed. Then the floor rushed up toward me. When I opened my eyes again, Nicole was kneeling beside me. "Elena, stay still." Another nurse was checking my pulse. "I'm okay." "You passed out." "I just need a minute." "You are not going anywhere." The doctor on duty examined me a few minutes later. My blood pressure was low and I was badly dehydrated. "You're exhausted," he said. "I'll be fine. You need fluids and rest." Hospital protocol required that they call my emergency contact. Unfortunately, that person was my father. About 45 minutes later, I heard familiar voices near the doorway. Thomas Reed stepped inside first. He was 66, but still moved with the solid confidence of someone who had spent decades working with his hands. My mother, Linda, followed behind him, quiet as always. Brittany came last, scrolling on her phone. Nicole spoke to them quietly while I sat on the bed. The doctor explained that I had collapsed from dehydration and exhaustion, but there was no sign of anything life-threatening. My father crossed his arms. She pushes herself too far. The doctor gave a polite nod. She needs rest. Brittany sighed loudly. I drove all the way across town for this. My mother glanced at me but did not say anything. I waited for someone to ask if I was okay. No one did. After a few more minutes, my father turned toward the door. If she's stable, we should get going. Nicole frowned slightly. You can stay with her if you want. My father shook his head. She'll be fine. Brittany was already halfway down the hall. The door closed behind them. Nicole looked at me. You want me to call someone else? I shook my head. I'm okay. The truth was that this reaction did not surprise me. My family had a long history of minimizing anything that looked like weakness. When I was younger, my father often said the same thing whenever I pushed back about something. You always make things bigger than they are. Sometimes he added another line, you're too emotional, or the one I heard the most, you need to calm down. The word dramatic floated through our house like background noise. The next morning, I was discharged and went home. Sophia was already at school and the house was quiet. I took a shower and tried to convince myself the whole thing was just another rough shift. Later that afternoon, Nicole texted me. You feeling better? Yeah. Get some rest. I will. That evening, I opened Facebook for a few minutes while Sophia worked on her homework at the kitchen table. The first post in my feed was from Brittany. Some people create emergencies because they need attention. It did not mention my name. It did not need to. A few mutual friends had already commented. Someone had reacted with a laughing emoji. Another person wrote something about people loving drama. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. At work the next day, 2 nurses asked if everything was okay at home. I smiled and told them I was just tired. For the rest of the week, my father acted as if nothing unusual had happened. One evening, he mentioned that his truck needed repairs. You think you could help cover it? I nodded automatically. Later that night, after Sophia went to bed, I was sitting at the kitchen table going through a few emails on my phone when one subject line caught my attention. It was from Experian. Credit alert notification. I opened it and read the first sentence twice before the words made sense. I set my phone down on the kitchen table and opened my laptop because somehow a bigger screen felt like it might make the email less real. Sophia was asleep already. The house was finally quiet. I typed in my information, answered the security questions, and waited for the credit report to load. For a second, I thought I had clicked into someone else's file. There were 5 open credit card accounts I did not recognize. Not 1 or 2, 5. The balances were all high enough to make my stomach drop. By the time I added them together in my head, the number came out to about $46,800. Every account listed my address in North Linden. I refreshed the page. Then I checked again. Same accounts, same balances, same address. I sat there with one hand over my mouth, trying to make it fit into some version of reality that made sense. Identity theft happened to people. I knew that. Patients talked about it all the time. But it was always something that sounded distant, the kind of headache that belonged to somebody in another state who clicked on the wrong link. Not me. Not from inside my own address. I pulled my phone back toward me and stared at Daniel Carter's name in my contacts. We had gone to high school together on the west side before life took us in completely different directions. He was 42 now and had built a reputation as the kind of attorney who did not scare easily. We were not the kind of friends who talked every week, but when we did, it was easy. I called. He picked up on the second ring. Elena, do you have a minute? His voice changed immediately. What happened? I looked back at the screen. I just pulled my credit report and there are 5 cards in my name I never opened. How much? About 46,800. There was a short silence. Can you send me screenshots right now? I can. Do that first, then don't close anything. I'll look at it tonight. I emailed him everything while my hands shook hard enough to make me mistype my own password twice. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. I'm opening the files now, Daniel said. Stay with me. I leaned back in the kitchen chair and listened to him click through the reports. These accounts go back to mid-2023, he said. Latest one opened late last year. I closed my eyes. Mid-2023 meant this had been happening while I was packing lunches, picking up extra shifts, and paying for groceries for 5 people in one house. You sure you never applied for any store cards? No. What about online financing? No. He kept scrolling. Okay, these all list your home address. Payment history is mixed. Some minimum payments were made for a while, then balances climbed. I swallowed. Can you see where the money was spent? Some of it, home improvement stores, auto parts, online electronics retailers. A pulse started beating behind my right eye. Then he paused. What? There's a larger charge history tied to a supplier that sells HVAC equipment. I stared out into the dark kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly. Somewhere upstairs, one of the floorboards shifted, probably from my father turning over in bed. My father had spent most of his adult life doing HVAC work. Elena, I'm here. You know anybody who would shop there? I did not answer right away. I know someone who used to. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'm not making assumptions yet. Neither was I. At least, that is what I told myself. The next morning, I got Sophia ready for school on autopilot. Cereal, backpack, permission slip signed for a field trip, her hair pulled into a ponytail while she complained I always made it too tight. When we got into the car, she looked at me from the back seat. You look tired. I am tired. You should go to bed after work today. I smiled at her in the mirror. That's a good plan. After I dropped her off at school, I sat in the parking lot for 2 extra minutes and stared at the steering wheel. I wanted to believe there was still an ordinary explanation hiding somewhere. A credit bureau error, a file merge, some stupid glitch I would laugh about later. By lunch, Daniel had called twice. I missed the first one because I was with a patient. I stepped outside to the ambulance bay to return it. I found something else, he said. My chest tightened. What? There's another file attached through the address history. I waited. It's under Sophia's name. Everything around me went thin and sharp. The diesel smell from the ambulances, the cold March air, the metal railing under my hand. No. Elena. No, she is 9. I know. What kind of account? A credit card opened early last year. Low limit, but it's there. I could not speak for a second. I thought about Sophia sitting cross-legged on the living room rug doing math worksheets. Sophia picking out stickers at Target. Sophia still asking me to leave the hallway light on at night. Can they do that? They can try, Daniel said. People do it because minors usually don't have anyone checking their credit. My mouth went dry. So this isn't a mistake? I don't think it is. I looked through the glass doors into the ER, where Nicole was speaking with a resident near the nurse's station. Daniel's voice softened. Listen to me. You need copies of everything, and you need to keep this quiet until we understand exactly what we're looking at. I went back inside and finished my shift, because that is what adults do when the world starts coming apart at 1 in the afternoon on a Thursday. At home that evening, the house smelled like pot roast and onions. My mother had dinner on the stove. My father was in his recliner watching cable news. Brittany was at the counter, scrolling through her phone with one hand and drinking diet soda with the other. Everything looked so normal, it made my skin crawl. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, working on spelling words. I kissed the top of her head and set my bag down. My father looked over at me. "Hey, insurance bill came in for the truck." I stopped halfway to the sink. "Okay. They want it by Monday. You think you can cover it and I'll square up later?" There was no embarrassment in his voice, no hesitation, just the same assumption he had carried for years. If money was needed, I would find it. If a bill showed up, I would absorb it. If the floor started dropping out from under me, I was still expected to keep the lights on for everyone else. I looked at him more carefully than I had in a long time, at the relaxed way he sat there, at the confidence, at the complete certainty that what was mine was available to him. "I'll look at it," I said. He nodded once and turned back to the television. My mother set plates on the table like she had not heard a thing. Brittany did not look up from her phone. Later, after Sophia went upstairs to shower, I stood at the kitchen counter rinsing dishes while she called down spelling words she wanted me to quiz her on. Her voice floated through the house, bright and ordinary. I dried my hands and went to the bottom of the stairs. "Start with number 3. She grinned from the landing and read the word out loud. For the next 10 minutes, I listened to my daughter stumble through syllables and correct herself and laugh when she got one wrong. It should have calmed me. Instead, it made everything inside me lock into place. Whatever was happening with my credit was bad. Whoever had touched Sophia's name had crossed a line I could not let myself explain away. That night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open and my phone in my hand. Daniel had emailed copies of both reports and a short list of next steps. At the bottom of the message, he had written one sentence on its own line: "We need to compare the application signatures." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophia's name on that account. Not mine, hers. 9 years old, still sleeping with a stuffed animal tucked under one arm, and somehow already carrying debt she did not even know existed. By the time the sun came up over North Linden, I had already dug through the file cabinet in the hall closet looking for anything with my father's signature on it. Tax forms, old insurance paperwork, a home repair estimate from years ago. My hands were shaking, but not the way they had in the break room at Riverside. This was not exhaustion. This was anger trying to stay quiet long enough to be useful. I scanned everything and sent it to Daniel before I drove Sophia to school. At work, I moved through my shift like someone following instructions in a language I knew by memory instead of thought. Start an IV, check vitals, update a chart, smile at a patient's husband in room 12. I did all of it, but part of me stayed fixed on my phone in my scrub pocket. Daniel called just after 3. I compared the signatures. I stepped into an empty supply room and shut the door. And it's close enough that I would not call it coincidence. I leaned back against the metal shelving. How close? Close enough that if this went in front of the right people, your father's handwriting would be a serious problem. I stared at a stack of saline bags on the shelf in front of me. And Brittany? What about her? Her name shows up on 2 of the accounts as an authorized user. That landed differently than my father's signature had. My father using me fit an old pattern I had spent most of my life pretending not to see. Brittany stepping into it beside him was something colder. You sure? I checked twice. I thanked him and hung up, then stood there another minute trying to steady my breathing before I went back out to the floor. That night at home, Brittany was in the kitchen painting her nails at the table while Sophia worked on a social studies worksheet. My mother was folding dish towels. My father was not home yet. Brittany looked up. "You look awful." I put my bag on the counter. "Long shift." She shrugged. "You should really take care of yourself." I looked at her hand holding the nail polish brush, pale pink polish, a silver ring she bought online last Christmas after telling everyone money was tight. I wondered how many things in this house had passed through accounts with my name on them. Sophia held up her worksheet. "Mom, can you check number 4?" I walked over and bent beside her chair. "It's 13 colonies, not 12. She smiled. "I knew that. I just wanted to see if you were paying attention." "Nice try." I kissed the top of her head, and Brittany laughed softly behind me like she was watching a cute commercial. I went upstairs before I said something I could not take back. The next morning, Daniel called again, earlier this time. I found something in Franklin County court records. I stopped pouring coffee. What kind of something? There was a pause long enough to make my stomach tighten. A petition for guardianship. I did not understand the sentence for a second. For who? For you. I sat down hard at the kitchen table. What? It was filed by Thomas Reed. The coffee maker hissed behind me. Upstairs, I could hear Sophia moving around in her room, getting dressed for school. "Read it to me." "It claims you're mentally overwhelmed due to work stress and not consistently capable of managing your financial affairs." I pressed my fingers against my forehead. "No, there is more." Of course there was. "It references your collapse at Riverside last month. There are attached medical records and a supporting statement from Brittany." I closed my eyes. "What does it say?" "That you've been struggling to manage stress and making erratic decisions." The kitchen blurred for a second, and I had to focus on the edge of the table to keep from drifting somewhere useless. It was not just the fraud. It was not just the lies. They were building a version of me, one where I was unstable, exhausted, irresponsible, and in need of rescue. One where my father could step in looking like the reasonable one. My house, my accounts, my paycheck, my daughter sleeping under my roof. All of it suddenly looked different. Daniel kept talking, calm and measured. If that petition went anywhere, it could become leverage. I heard the word, but barely needed it explained. Control, access, permission, the right to make decisions about my life while calling it help. I looked toward the stairs. They used Sophia's name. I know. I lowered my voice, even though no one else was in the kitchen. They could have emptied my checking account, and maybe I would have still tried to explain it away, but they used my daughter's name. Then stop explaining it away. That was the moment something in me settled. Not softened, settled. The kind of stillness that comes right before a person stops hoping the truth will be kinder than it is. "Tell me what to do." He gave me 3 steps. File the FTC identity theft report, freeze my credit and Sophia's, make a police report. No lecture, no long explanation, just the order things needed to happen. I did all 3 over the next 48 hours. During my lunch break at Riverside, I filled out the FTC report from my car. After work, I called the credit bureaus and put freezes in place. The police report took longer than I expected, mostly because saying everything out loud made it sound more real. My father, my sister, my address, my child. When I got home that evening, my father was in the driveway wiping down his truck like a man with nothing to hide. He looked up as I got out of the car. "You off tomorrow?" "No." He nodded toward the house. "Pastor Michael asked about you on Sunday." I kept walking. "Did he?" "People are concerned. You've seemed worn out." Inside, my mother was slicing chicken for dinner. Brittany was scrolling through listings on her laptop at the kitchen table. A little later, my phone buzzed with a text from a woman at church I had known for years. Not a friend exactly, but close enough for awkward honesty. Your dad mentioned you've been under a lot of stress. He said the family is trying to help with your finances. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. So that was how they were doing it. Not with one big accusation, with conversations, careful words, worry, concern, little drops of doubt placed into other people's minds until the story hardened around me. At work the next day, I told Daniel, they're setting the stage. I figured they might. I want to confront them. Not yet. They filed something in court, Daniel. And you now have reports, timelines, account records, and signatures. Give me a little more time. I hated that he was right. On Friday evening, Thomas knocked on my bedroom door for the first time in months. I opened it halfway. He stood there with one hand in his pocket, wearing the expression he used whenever he wanted to sound patient. "We're having a meeting at church on Sunday." I did not answer. "Nothing dramatic, just family and Pastor Michael. We should talk through a few things." My hand tightened on the doorknob. "What things?" He gave me a small, sad smile that made my skin crawl. "What is best for everyone?" Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway with the house quiet around me, and Sunday waiting at the end of the hall like a closed room I already knew would not be safe. By Sunday morning, I had sorted the paperwork into a slim blue folder and driven to First Community Church with both hands locked too tightly around the steering wheel. I did not bring Sophia. She was with Nicole for the afternoon, eating grilled cheese in a quiet kitchen instead of sitting in a church meeting where my father planned to turn concern into a weapon. The fellowship room sat behind the main sanctuary, with beige walls, folding chairs, and the same industrial coffee smell every church basement in Ohio seemed to have. When I walked in, conversations dipped for half a beat and then started again softer than before. Pastor Michael Whitaker stood near the far end of the room, with Susan Keller and Robert Hayes. My father was beside them in a pressed button-down shirt, the picture of a tired man carrying a burden no one else understood. My mother stood close enough to him to look loyal. Brittany had her arms folded and her mouth set in that careful, wounded expression she used when she wanted people to think she had been patient for far too long. About 25 people from church were already seated, not enough to make it a spectacle, but more than enough to make it public. That was the point. Pastor Whitaker stepped forward. "Alina, thank you for coming." I wasn't given much of a choice. He gave me a look that tried to stay neutral. "We're here to have a calm conversation." My father touched the back of a chair and glanced around the room before sitting. He looked completely at ease. That unsettled me more than anger would have. I took a seat across from him and put the blue folder on my lap. For a moment, no one spoke. Coffee cups clicked against saucers. Someone shifted a folding chair on the tile floor. Then Pastor Whitaker cleared his throat. "Thomas told me the family has been worried about Elena's stress level. He asked if I would sit in and help keep the conversation constructive." My father leaned forward and clasped his hands. "I appreciate everyone being here." His voice carried easily, calm, reasonable, almost sad. "Elena has been under a lot of pressure. We all know how hard she's worked, and nobody doubts she loves Sophia. But lately, things have gotten worse. The collapse at the hospital scared all of us." That was a lie so polished it almost sounded gentle. My mother nodded as if she had spent the past week crying into dish towels over my condition. Brittany looked down at the table. "We've all tried to be supportive." I let them speak. That had been Daniel's advice, and it turned out he was right. There was power in watching them build the version of me they needed, while I stayed still enough to see every seam. My father kept going. "She's exhausted. She's carrying more than she can handle. I've been saying for years that she needs help and won't accept it. At some point, a family has to step in before something worse happens." Robert Hayes folded his hands over his stomach. You mean financial help? My father gave him a tired smile. Not exactly. Guidance, oversight, making sure bills are paid and things don't spiral. My pulse kicked harder, but I kept my face still. Brittany lifted her eyes to me. You know this isn't an attack. Her voice had the soft tremor of someone auditioning for sympathy. We just don't want you to crash again. Susan Keller turned toward me. Elena, honey, are you sleeping at all? There it was, the opening they had prepared. Not accusation, concern. Not cruelty, community care. The kind that looks holy from a distance and feels like a hand around your throat when you're the one sitting in the chair. I rested one hand on the folder in my lap. I'm listening. My father exhaled and looked to Pastor Whitaker like a man nearing the hardest part of a painful confession. I've already started asking about options that would make things safer, just temporary, until she gets back on her feet. The room tilted toward him. I could feel it happening, eyes moving from his face to mine and back again, measuring, reassessing, wondering whether the woman who fainted at work and looked tired on Sunday mornings might need someone else making decisions for her. Pastor Whitaker leaned forward slightly. Elena, do you feel overwhelmed? I thought about my daughter, spelling words at the kitchen table, about my father asking me to cover his truck insurance while debt sat in my name, about the police report folded inside the blue folder on my lap. Sometimes, I said. A few heads nodded immediately. My father softened his voice. That's all we're saying. I let that sit for one full beat. Then I stood up. The room went quiet in a different way. I set the blue folder on the table and opened it carefully, one tab at a time, like I was laying out instruments before a procedure. I think before anyone decides what I need, you should see what I've been dealing with. My father did not move at first. Then I saw a flicker near his jaw. I pulled out the certified copy of my deed and placed it in the center of the table. This house in North Linden belongs to me. I bought it in 2017. My name is the only one on it. Susan lowered her glasses and looked down at the paper. I took out the next set of pages. These are my credit reports. 5 accounts, balances highlighted, address repeated over and over. I did not open any of them. Brittany shifted in her seat. My father stared at the pages without touching them. The third document was a set of signature comparisons Daniel had prepared from the application records and my father's older business paperwork. I slid those forward next. These applications carry signatures that match Thomas Reed's handwriting. My mother made a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a warning. No one spoke. I took out the page I had dreaded seeing ever since Daniel emailed it to me from his office. A credit card account with Sophia's name on it. I put that one down last enough for everyone to understand what it was before I said anything. My daughter is 9 years old. The room did not just go quiet then, it tightened. Susan looked at me, then at the paper, then at my father. Robert's chair creaked as he sat back. I placed the final documents beside the rest. The identity theft report has already been filed. My hand rested on the police report for half a second before I moved it away. This is not confusion, it is not family stress, and it is not me losing control. My father finally stood. Elena, stop. His voice had changed, the softness was gone. You don't understand what you're looking at. I turned to face him fully. No, I understand exactly what I'm looking at. Pastor Whitaker had not touched his coffee. He was watching my father now, not me. Susan reached for the signature pages again, holding them closer to her face. Then she looked up. "Thomas, why is your name all over these forms?" No one moved after that. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time that afternoon, the room was no longer looking at me like I needed help. The weeks after that Sunday moved faster than I expected. Some changes happened in courtrooms and paperwork, and some happened quietly in the way people stopped looking at my father the same way. By January 2026, the first thing I noticed every morning was the quiet. Not the uneasy quiet of people avoiding each other in a crowded house, not the tense kind where every cabinet door and every footstep carried a message. This was different. This was the soft sound of heat coming through the vents in a townhouse that belonged only to me and Sophia. Westerville was not far from Columbus, but it felt like another life. The townhouse was smaller than the house in North Linden, and I loved it for that reason. Less to clean, less to carry, less room for people to drift in and decide they belonged there just because I had stopped saying no. The kitchen window faced a row of bare trees and a narrow patch of winter grass. On school mornings, Sophia ate cereal at the counter while I packed her lunch, and there was no one else at the table asking for money, favors, patience, one more chance. I had transferred to day shift at Riverside Medical Center the first week of January. It meant less overtime and fewer shift differentials, but it also meant I was home at night. I ate dinner with my daughter. I slept in my own bed at normal hours. My body had not fully forgiven me for the years I spent running on caffeine and obligation, but it was starting to. The legal part moved slower than the church room had. That was one of the first things Daniel told me after Sunday. Truth is immediate. Paperwork is not. He was right. The Columbus Police Department opened the investigation within days because the reports were already in motion by the time my father tried to recast me as unstable. Once the account records, signatures, and application history were collected in one place, the story got much harder for anyone to explain away. I was not in the room when Thomas finally sat down with his attorney, and I did not need to be. Daniel called me afterward. He took the plea. I stood in the hospital parking garage with my bag over one shoulder and my keys in my hand. For what exactly? Financial fraud tied to the fraudulent applications. It keeps the case from dragging through a longer fight. I looked out over the concrete levels and rows of cars below. Did he admit it? He accepted responsibility on paper, Elena. That was as close as I was ever going to get to an apology. The credit bureaus removed the fake accounts from my file over the next few months. Sophia's file was cleared too. Every time another letter came in confirming a deletion or correction, I opened it at the kitchen counter and let myself feel a little more air come back into my life. The social damage hit faster than the legal kind. First Community Church removed Thomas from the volunteer rotation before Easter. Nobody announced it from the pulpit, but in churches people always know. They know when a name disappears from the bulletin. They know when concern turns into distance. They know when someone who used to stand in the lobby shaking hands suddenly starts leaving through a side door. Brittany's fallout came next. By summer, word had moved through enough people that her office at the real estate agency let her go. Officially, it was about professionalism and trust. Unofficially, it was about the fact that no one wants an assistant handling paperwork after her name gets tied to financial fraud inside her own family. My mother called more than once. The first voicemail was shaky. "Elena, please call me back. We need to talk." The second sounded tired instead of sorry. "You can't keep punishing everyone forever." I listened to both while folding Sophia's laundry and deleted them without responding. A month later, she showed up once at Riverside near the end of my shift. She stood in the lobby in a tan coat with her purse clutched in both hands, looking smaller than I remembered. I stopped a few feet away. "I just want 5 minutes." "I don't." Her face tightened. "I'm still your mother. And I am still the person you watched get buried." That was all I had in me. I turned and walked back through the security door before she could answer. For a long time, I had confused boundaries with cruelty because that was how my family talked about them. Any limit I set was selfish. Any refusal meant I was cold. Any question I asked made me difficult. It took me nearly 40 years to understand that a boundary is not an act of aggression. It is a line around what you are responsible for protecting. In my case, that line had my daughter's name inside it. I sold the North Linden house in November 2025. By then, the market had cooled a little, but it still sold fast enough. When I stood in the empty living room one last time, I expected to feel grief. What I felt, instead, was relief so sharp it almost embarrassed me. That house had held too many years of me trying to earn love by being useful. The townhouse in Westerville held something else entirely: routine, privacy, space to breathe. Sophia adjusted faster than I did. She liked that her new room got afternoon light. She liked that her school was close enough that we did not spend half our morning in traffic. Mostly, she liked that nights were quiet. One evening in late January, I was making spaghetti while she sat at the counter coloring with a cup of markers spread around her like poker chips. She looked up from the page. "Are we staying here a long time?" I stirred the sauce and smiled at her. "Yeah, I think we are." "Good." She went back to coloring as if that settled everything worth knowing. Maybe it did. After dinner, we cleared the plates together. She dried while I washed. The dishwasher hummed. A neighbor's dog barked once somewhere outside. The kind of ordinary sounds I used to miss because the house was always full of someone else's crisis. When the kitchen was clean, Sophia climbed onto her stool again and held up the paper she had been working on. It was a drawing of our new place: 2 windows, a blue front door, a crooked little tree in the yard, me standing beside her, both of us smiling too wide. "You forgot the mailbox," I told her. She grinned. "I can add it." I leaned against the counter and watched her press a brown marker to the page, and for the first time in a very long while, nothing inside me was bracing for impact. No one was arguing in the next room. No one was waiting to turn my paycheck into their plan. No one was calling me dramatic because I finally saw what was happening. There was just a warm kitchen, a child who felt safe, and the quiet I had paid for in ways no mortgage statement could ever show. If you have ever had to draw a line with family to protect your peace, your child, or your own sanity, then you already know how heavy that choice can feel. If that has happened to you, tell me what boundary changed your life or what boundary you wish you had set sooner.